Bloom interview with guitarist Steve Brown. More info at fullandbloom.com. How are you keeping yourself busy during the quarantine?
Well, I have two daughters. I have a 20-year-old and a 7-year-old. So we got my oldest one finished her sophomore year of college the other day online, and my little one just is finishing up first grade. So we got the whole homeschooling thing going on, and other than that, brother, I've been blessed. I have a studio in my house, so I've been doing a ton of mixing and mastering and doing, baby band type stuff. I've been doing a ton of transferring, like doing like the digital transfer and analog stuff, cassette to digital. And are you like an engineer at all? Do you know anything about like recording?
I do.
So I had, back in the day when I first built my studio in '93, I had those Tascam D88.
Sure.
So I'm transferring all that stuff. I have 15 years of tapes. I think I got my first Pro Tools rig probably in 99. So I've been just doing, like a lot of people, doing like the busy stuff. I'm always doing outside writing and whatnot, so I've been just pounding away at that. I've been blessed in the sense that, this situation's also given a lot of like my, let's say, like baby band clients or whatnot. They're like, oh, dude, I want to get all my stuff digitized. So they send me over like 5 albums of material to master. And I'm like, wow, this is great.
Do you have an old school 24-track analog machine, or do you do any of that?
No, I don't.
Okay.
And what's funny about that, I'll send you a picture later. My first engineer guy who produced the first Trixter analog tapes, who coincidentally was the guy who produced Ray Gillen's demo tape that got him the Black Sabbath gig, which I have. I'll send you. I'll make you an MP3, dude. I'll send you these 2 songs that he did. And right before the pandemic broke out, the plan was to transfer all that. So I went to his house, got all the machines, and we were all set to do the transfers because it's the Tascam 8-track, the 38, I believe it is. We had everything ready. He's got the old Rocktron noise reduction. Then the pandemic broke out. I'm not an analog tape guy, so I don't know how to work like tape machines. So the extent of my tape, knowledge is the D88s and the ADATs.
Do you actually record albums like for other bands?
Oh yeah, totally, man. I've been, again, 27 years I've been in my house here. I like to make the joke, the house that Trixter built. That was my first order of business when I bought my house, was build a studio. We've done a couple Trixter records here. We did my other post-Trixter project. For a while there, I was doing a lot of like outside bands, but probably over the last 10 years, man, everybody seems to be just recording on their own. When you buy a laptop nowadays, you either have GarageBand or you have Logic. Everybody wants to be an engineer. We all know how great technology is in the sense of with Dropbox, what you could do. I mean, it just still to this day, it amazes me thinking back to the waste of back in the day of making videos, making records, and what we can do now. You can make a record with guys all around the world, never be in the same room, trade files, and it's the quality's incredible. It's mind-blowing to me. And then let alone the video end of it. Give It To Me Good, I think, was $180,000 budget for Trixter back in the day. And then One in a Million was $250,000. Like, you got to be kidding me. You can make videos that look that good on your iPhone now.
And that really brings us to your new release, Tokyo Motor Fist. New album is called Lions. And that's what I'm assuming. All the guys are in different locations when you record?
Yeah, well, a little bit. Tokyo Motor Fist is, these guys are guys that I grew up with. We're all sort of tri-state area. Three quarters of the band are New Jersey guys. So Chuck Burgi from Billy Joel, he was the drummer in Rainbow for years. He's from Montclair, New Jersey. Grew up with Joe Walsh and those cats over in Montclair. And then Ted Poley, our singer in Tokyo Motor Fist, grew up in Ramsey, New Jersey, and I grew up in Paramus, New Jersey. Greg Smith, our bass player, is a Long Island guy, so he's from a couple miles away, but we're all kind of based. We were based in the same area. Now, Greg lives out in Pennsylvania, as does Ted. So Ted's the only one who comes to my house and does his vocals because he's not a home studio guy. So he's been here. He comes and we do like 2 or 3 songs at a time, and that's the way we bang it out. But on this record, Chuck actually did his drum tracks in his studio. He lives in he's in the next town over from me in West Milford, New Jersey. So he recorded his drums on his own, and Greg did his bass parts out in Pennsylvania on his own. So it's just very efficient.
The drums, I thought, sounded really good. Are those samples or straight up drums?
It's a mix of everything. No, I mean, on Tokyo Motor Fist, it's very much a big rock, Def Leppard style production. So, I mean, yeah, there's some of the real drums in there, but you're talking about, and this record was mixed by my good friend Bruno Ravel, who's the bass player in Danger Danger. He also has a side band called The Defiant. He's an incredible engineer, producer, been a dear friend of mine for 30 years. He lives in the other next town over to me. So it's like, dude, we have so many cats in this area where I am in northern New Jersey, but nowadays we don't even have to go to each other's houses. So Bruno and I mixed it, but yeah, this is, the Tokyo Motor Fist record is kind of like the kitchen sink Mutt Lange type production that I love, and I like to tell people it's kind of like, me being the biggest Van Halen fan in the world and Def Leppard, that if you took Van Halen's old school style of production with the guitar sounds and sort of some of the vocal sensibilities and added Def Leppard's over the top Mutt Lange production, that's kind of what you're getting with Tokyo Motor Fist.
I mean, really, the mix sounded, a lot of that stuff, I wouldn't say a lot. There's lots of stuff on the Frontiers label that I hear that sounds great, but I know I've heard some stuff on there where it's pretty questionable, some of the mixes. So I thought it was a great job on the mix. Your guitar sounds like a beast. How are you recording your guitars nowadays?
Again, I just do everything in my studio. So I'm doing a kind of a hybrid thing. I've been, an Eddie Van Halen EVH endorser for 27 years now. So, Ed's an old friend of mine. So I've been using the original 5150s, and now I'm with the Fender, the new EVH brand. So I use the 5150 amps. I'm really involved with this Headrush pedal board company. They're out of Rhode Island. And I've been a floorboard guy, kind of like, with the Fractals and the Kempers, but I've been using the Headrush for the last couple of years, and it's just an incredible way to go. It's got the custom IRs in it, and I'm able to dial in the tones that I love. And look, I don't know if you're a guitar player or not, but we all know as guitar players that 90% of it is in your hands and your feel. You could give me any sort of amp and put me through it, and it's going to sound like me. Just like that old story when Van Halen was out on tour with Ted Nugent, and Ted Nugent heard Eddie's rig, and he goes, "Oh man, I want to play. Let me play through your rig." And you know what? Ted Nugent plugged into Eddie's rig, and guess what? It sounded just like Ted Nugent.
Right.
I'm really, Adam, I'm really into all the new technology. I've started experimenting with a lot of the new, guitar plugins that are out there that I'm really digging. I'm not going to mention any names, but we all know how great technology is. For drums, we're big fans of the Steven Slate, the Slate plugins and the drum trigger. I mean, we use that on the record. Steven Slate's a Jersey guy as well, so he's an old friend of mine, and, I'm always supporting his stuff. But it's really, again, it goes back to, I'm still that little kid that whether, making the first Trixter record at Sound City or the Village Recorder in LA, I still get that same kind of feeling when I find a new sound or a new plug-in, a new compressor, any sort of new thing that you just go, oh my God, this just sounds so amazing, and I still get that same kind of buzz as I did, let's say, the first time plugging my guitar into, let's say, a Soldano back in 1989, and then having it go through, the API board at Sound City in California, man, when you hear it going through those big monitors for the first time and your hair stands up, and I still get that same feeling.
With the first single, Youngblood, you guys did the video. Is this filmed during this quarantine period? Because it looked like all you guys are in separate locations.
Yes. Sadly, we had all the intentions of doing a real big rock video with the big stage set. With Tokyo Motor Fist, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're doing pretty much, if you took Trixter, Danger, Def Leppard, Van Halen, Bon Jovi, mixed it all together, that's the essence of what it is. The big, kind of a modernized version of what was back in the day. So we like to do that with our videos. So that was the plan, but unfortunately, in the situation we're in now, we had to all do it at our respective homes and studios and kind of just do the best we can. But I think overall it came out cool, and everybody kind of understands the situation that we're in now, and this is kind of the new norm for a while.
Oh, I thought it looked great. Did you guys do that through your phone?
Some of it. Some of the guys film their parts. Look, I've got a GoPro camera. I think Ted and Chuck film their parts on their iPhone. Greg has a GoPro. So, look, I think one of the cool things, if you can say cool, but in the situation that we're in, I'm always a very positive guy in the sense where you always got to try to find some good and be able to kind of, what are we going to take away from all of this? And I think for musicians, I think it's that time for all the guys who weren't technologically savvy. This pandemic has made everybody in the music business have to step up their game, whether it's with teaching guitar. I've been doing it for years, but giving Skype lessons. And for some of my other friends, I'm not going to mention any names, but I'm still amazed at how many guys, let's say some guys that are a little bit older than me, but have been in the digital world for a long time, they still make records like cavemen. And it amazes me. It's like, man, when did you not get the memo that we don't make records like we did in 1995? I got friends of mine that are still using those hard disk recorders, and I just shake my head. But that saying, sometimes you just can't teach old dogs new tricks, but this situation that we're in has forced a lot of my friends, and again, getting back to, I'm so sorry for all the people out there, especially in our business, the crew guys, the band guys, who were supposed to be on tour, who are in financial ruin right now because of this. But for all the musicians who didn't have, let's say, Pro Tools rigs or Logic rigs, be able to record at their house, most of them now, they're learning it. And, so I think there's going to be a lot of great music that comes out of this. And as always, we got to try to find some positivity in this terrible situation.
I would think you just shift focus and get more into putting together new albums or switch focus on that kind of stuff. I've seen a lot of guys online doing a whole bunch of things, from lessons to other little podcast like things, but that's how I would. I mean, switch it to maybe this being a writing phase, because it looks like, especially the live music, that'll be a while before that goes back to normal, even if people start going out again to restaurants.
It is going to be a long, long time. Dude, listen, I just want to tell you, I really am glad that I'm talking to you, because I am a true fan of your show, and I stumbled upon it by accident, sort of. I'm not really like a crazy YouTuber, but I don't know what I was doing, and all of a sudden it came up, like the Rat thing, Bo Hill, and I'm a huge Rat fan. Warren DeMartini is one of my favorite guitar players. He's a very dear friend of mine. So I saw the thing, and as soon as I started listening to it, I couldn't stop. And I was like, this fucking guy, nobody's doing a show like you're doing, man. And that's why I had to email you, because I'm like, I want to be on this fucking show because I think it's awesome.
I appreciate that, man. That means a lot. It really does.
Either way, man, I just love what you're doing, and I love hearing the stories, because, what's funny is a lot of the stories I already knew, because with Trixter, I was always the guy. I was the guy. I was the songwriter, co-producer, writer. So all these inside, let's say the deep, dark secrets of making records, I knew all this stuff. I knew back in the day that Alec John Such didn't play bass on the Bon Jovi records. That was always Hugh McDonald. And, Chuck Burgi played the drums on half the first Bon Jovi record. It's funny. It's great to see the innocence in people who aren't in the business. It's like telling them Santa Claus isn't real, It's like they go, oh, man, really? I didn't know that.
God, I didn't even know that he didn't play bass on those records. He didn't play bass on any of them, huh?
No, it's Hugh McDonald. It's a funny story, and I don't want to waste too much time on Bon Jovi, but that's a whole nother thing. But Hugh McDonald has played bass on every Bon Jovi record since the first one, and that was always his thing. And I think what it was Hugh didn't have the look, and John put the band together, and Alec, John Such, was the guy who kind of helped John assemble. He was the one who got Tico Torres. He was the one who got Richie Sambora. Alec was the guy, but he was never good enough to cut it in the studio. They did half the Bon Jovi record. That's why Chuck played on it, because Chuck Burgi, at the time, he was like a session guy. This was before he was in Rainbow. He was playing, and he just got done with Hall & Oates. He did this thing with Bob Kulick. He did this record. He did this band Balance, which I believe was Bob Kulick, Chuck Burgi, and maybe Kazem Sultan. And I think Bo might have produced that. You should ask Bo about Balance. But it was a power station thing, and so Chuck was there, and it was like one of those things where Chuck was playing on Aldo Nova's record, and they said, "Hey man, we need a drummer for this kid who's the intern, who's Tony Bon Jovi's nephew." And so Chuck was like, "Sure." So he wound up playing on 6 of the songs that were basically demos that they used for half of the first Bon Jovi record,
which made it to the final record, right?
Oh yeah, that's really not anything that's not common knowledge. Chuck has credit on the Bon Jovi record, on the first Bon Jovi record, as far as playing on it.
What does Alec John Such do nowadays?
Man, I haven't seen Alec in 25 years. Last I heard is he moved down to North Carolina. I think he's a partner in a Harley dealership, but he basically washed his hands of Bon Jovi. He kind of, when he got fired or he left back in the day, it wasn't a good situation. And again, he wasn't a songwriter. He was just basically, as everybody in Bon Jovi to some degree, is a hired gun. It's John's thing. But, Alec back in the day, getting back to what I sent you, that picture of me, the Jersey club scene back in the 70s, 70s and 80s, early 80s, you had these great bands. There was a band called Phantom's Opera, which was one of the big New Jersey bands, along with a band called White Tiger, and there was Zebra from Long Island. They were from New Orleans, but, Zebra and Twisted Sister were part of the Long Island contingency who played all the tri-state area clubs when cover bands were making $10,000 a night. It was an incredible scene. And then part of that goes to back in that story that I was telling you when I sent you that picture of Ray Gillen when I was a little kid. My guitar teacher back in the day, Ross Barada, he had a band, a cover band, a New Jersey cover band that was, they were mid-level, I'm going to say. And their drummer lived in Paramus, and we were friends with him when I was a little kid. My original drummer in Trixter, this guy Mike Payne, he used to cut George Pagonis' family, his childhood home, he used to cut the lawn, and the band used to rehearse in the garage. And that's the first time I met Ray Gillen, was in 1982. And I was a little kid, and I started taking guitar lessons from their guitar teacher, and that was my introduction to rock and roll. And I'd already been playing guitar for probably 5 years at that point. I started playing guitar when I was 8 years old in 1978. So by then I already had kind of the beginnings of Trixter started, and I was playing in garages, and that took it to the next level. And my first live performance was at a club in New Jersey called the Circus in Bergenfield, New Jersey, with the band Harlot, with a singer who went on to be, what we know, Ray Gillen, who went on to play with Black Sabbath, with Badlands, and and God rest his soul. He was one of the greatest rock singers and just got dealt a shitty card in life, if you know what I mean.
What do you remember about Ray at that time?
Ray was just, what can I say? I was a little kid. I used to play basketball with him. This was I'm thinking of summer of 1983, and we'd be hanging out in typical band stuff. You'd rehearse for a little while, and, and I was a little kid. I was kind of the little kid, the fly on the wall who'd be sitting there. It was my my sort of summer school. I'd be hanging out with these guys. It was my introduction to seeing, the other side of the rock and roll life, where all of a sudden you're seeing these guys that are, probably 18, 19, 20, 21, older guys, and I'm sitting there watching them play Van Halen, play Deep Purple, play Dio, and my jaw is just dropping, and the volume. My first time as a little kid sitting in a garage hearing, Marshall stacks right near me, and we didn't know anything about hearing protection back then, so I'm just sitting there, it's probably 120 decibels, and, seeing men smoking cigarettes, drinking, doing drugs or whatever, and I'm just kind of, a little kid going, wow, this is rock and roll, and it kind of makes you grow up real quick, if you know what I mean. But it was some of the greatest memories of my life, and, shaped who I am, because my guitar teacher, Ross, was one of, I had a couple guitar teachers, but he was the guy who really took me, helped me get to that next level of playing, and the whole Van Halen, Randy Rhoads, Def Leppard, all the great shredders back in the day, Jakey Lee, Warren DeMartini. He was the guy who got me to that level. We're playing Richie Blackmore stuff, I was a Kiss Van Halen kid, that's what got me started on playing guitar in 1978. But later on, probably 82, 83 is when I discovered like Richie Blackmore through my guitar teacher. And because Ray was a huge Deep Purple Dio fan, so that's when I really got the education on those things. And I just remember those times were just incredible. And then, so that picture that I sent you, that time when I played on stage with Harlot at the club, my friend and I went with the drummer, George Pagonis. His mom and dad took us. They were able to sneak us into the club. They kind of said that, oh, this is George's little cousin, Steve, and he's going to come. And I didn't even know. And all of a sudden they announced, hey, we're going to bring up, a guy to play right now. And I was 12 years old, and here I am. I get, strapped on my guitar teacher's, souped up Fender Strat. And they go, hey, man, play You Really Got Me with us. And that was my first time on stage, and luckily we had some people there that were able to take some pictures of it, and it was one of those pivotal moments in my life that changed my life forever. And it was pretty much from that moment on, I said, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life, and it pretty much kind of set the stone for me, if you will.
At age, it's such a magical time to begin with.
I talk about it all the time. My first concert was seeing Kiss in 1979 on the Dynasty Tour at Madison Square Garden. That was my first concert that I went to. My second concert was Van Halen at Madison Square Garden. Two of my favorite bands, and the two bands that I based my whole career on and everything that I ever did, and still to this day I kind of do. Kiss and Van Halen and Def Leppard and Bon Jovi and a couple other bands, still to this day I kind of base everything that I do, whether it's writing or playing wise, against that, and then throw into the mix all these years later that I'm friends with Gene and Paul from Kiss, and like I said, Eric Singer, Ace Frehley. I'm friends with all these guys. I'm friends with Eddie Van Halen. So it's like, man, this is, I truly am living the rock and roll dream. And Adam, I say this all the time, and I say it honest to God, the truth. I am one of the luckiest guys, one of the luckiest kids in the world, that I was able to achieve every dream that I ever had 100 times over, and I'm still reaching for the stars, and these magical things still seem to happen for me. So, just for all the fans out there and people listening, I am one of the most fortunate, luckiest guys you'll ever meet.
Back to the Tokyo Motor Fist, the song I heard has some of that Def Leppard backing vocals. How do you guys do some of that? Is that more in the recording process, or is that more in the mix?
No, that's all me. That's me. Look, here's the on the production end of my influence. Mutt Lange to me is the be all end all. Mutt to me is the greatest rock and roll record producer. I think he's the greatest producer, writer, that I've ever heard. And sadly, I never got to work with him. I only met him once. His engineer back in the day, Mike Shipley, who engineered a lot of the Def Leppard, mixed and engineered all the Mutt stuff. We were lucky enough with Trixter, he mixed the video remix for the one in our second single, One in a Million. So luckily I was able to work with Mike, and that was an honor, but it was always a dream to work with Mutt, but it never worked out. With that being said, I've learned a lot of, Phil Collin from Def Leppard has taught me a lot of the Mutt Lange tricks, and of course playing with Def Leppard for the last 7 years, I get a lot of the stories from Joe and Phil and Sav and Rick, about working with Mutt. But that's all, the production-wise regarding the vocal sound, the background vocals, that's all me, and it's very much done in the Mutt Lange recording way, where it's, probably I'm going to say between 10, some of the songs, 10 and 16 tracks of me stacking my vocals, 3-part harmonies. And I got to give a shout out to my old friend Jack Ponte, who is a big New Jersey songwriter, producer, another one from back in the day who co-wrote some of the Trixter songs, worked with the Skid Row guys, worked with Alice Cooper. He was the co-producer on the Hey Stupid Alice Cooper record. He was the guy who taught me how to do sort of the Mutt Lange vocal stack process, to where you chart out each of you kind of basically, from what I know and from the way Mutt worked back in the day, Mutt did a lot of stuff on keyboards. So he would build his songs, and a lot of the Def Leppard vocal stacks on Pyromania and, of course, Hysteria were all based on keyboard chords, whether it's Photograph or whether it was Too Late. All those harmonies he would work out kind of on keyboards and then sing it, which a lot of producers and a lot of bands do. We all work out harmonies, but Mutt had a certain way. So my friend Jack Ponte was a huge influence as far as he taught me, and I learned that probably, I'm going to say in 1989, and I still to this day use the same sort of technique of what I do is basically I chart out the song, I write out the chords, and then I write out the melody, the main melody, I write out the notes, and then I basically, on the guitar or on a keyboard, I follow it and do the harmonies, and I sing those things and get it very, very precise, and it just has a magical sound to me. With the Tokyo Motor Fist stuff and a lot of the, let's say, 80s hard rock, that production style, it's when you stack those vocals, do 8 to 16 tracks of one part, and then compression and EQ. And then the other cool thing is that what I found doing vocals this way, the fact that I do them all myself, is the fact of a timing thing. When you use other people to do background vocals, there's timing inflections. Nobody can sing a vocal part the same way as you can. That's why on the Leppard records, Mutt is pretty much the background vocal guy. He's doing all those really tight harmonies. Same thing on the Bryan Adams record. Same thing that he did on the Shania Twain records. You can hear it. It's very, very distinct. But it also goes to how, like Metallica does their guitar parts on their records, where James Hetfield plays all the rhythm guitars. And that's because of the tightness factor. There's a timing factor and a tightness that no matter how good Kirk is, he's not going to get it. And it's not going to be as precise and perfect as, let's say, if James does all the guitar parts. And it's the same sort of mentality. And that's the sound we're going for. We're not reinventing the wheel here with Tokyo Motor Fist. It's very much a nod to that great Def Leppard style, Mutt Lange style. Even, like what you've talked about with Beau Hill, because I know Beau is a huge Mutt Lange fan, as any rock producer from the 80s is. I mean, that guy, the Def Leppard records, they were the blueprint of how to make pop rock melodic records back in the day, and they still are.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised when I learned that it wasn't just Juan doing all those backing vocals for Rat. I thought it was really cool that it was the two of them that created that Rat sound.
Yeah, and again, being such a fan of Rat as a kid, man, those records, especially the first two Rat records, and Invasion of Your Privacy is my personal favorite. You can definitely hear a lot of Mutt Lange influence on Invasion of Your Privacy. Pyromania, to me, and I still say it to this day, Pyromania was the groundbreaking record. It was a new way of making records, the way Mutt recorded that record to where the kick and snare were programmed. That was the first record that anybody did that, as far as I know, where the kick and snare were programmed, but Rick Allen played the fills and played the cymbals, because back then the Lynn drum machine couldn't recreate the cymbals. Never, even to this day, cymbal samples do not sound as good as the real thing to my ear.
Right.
Still to this day, Pyromania is the benchmark that everybody used, and some people are still trying to get that style. But getting back to Trixter, I was always the songwriter and the singer, guitar player, but I wanted to be Eddie Van Halen. I didn't want to be the front man. I wanted to be Eddie Van Halen. So I was a singer, and I learned as my influence from, let's say, somebody like Richie Sambora, or being that guitar player who could really sing. Richie was a huge influence on me, because Bon Jovi, again, that was a huge influence on Trixter. Richie was the guy that I looked up to, because Eddie, as great as Eddie Van Halen as a guitar player and performer and writer and everything, he wasn't a virtuoso singer, if you will. Richie Sambora, to me, was the whole package. He was the lead vocalist in his own right. He was a phenomenal guitar player, phenomenal songwriter, and a phenomenal performer. So to me, that was where, as a kid, I saw him and I said, wow, I'm really going to focus on my singing. That was always my thing. So on the Trixter records, pretty much on most of the background vocals, a lot of that's me. Funny story about the first Trixter record, though, which I don't think you know, which is really cool, is that on the first Trixter record, we had some guest vocalists who really did a lot of the background vocal work, which was Bobby Kimball from Toto and David Glenn Isley from Jafria. If you listen to One in a Million, Give It to Me Good, and there was another guy, Billy Trudell, who went on to be Elton John's singer. He had a band in the 90s called War Pipes with a couple of Elton's bandmates. But those three guys and me, we did all the background vocals on the Trixter records. And, if you listen to like One in a Million in particular, you can really hear Bobby Kimball all over it. And it's really cool. I have some outtakes of Bobby singing, the out licks and vamp stuff, kind of like what he did at the end of like Rosanna, or the end of all those cool woo, all those awesome soulful things. I have like audio, and again, that's one of the things I was transferring. I have cassettes of him singing like licks, so our singer Pete could copy it and sing along with. It's pretty incredible.
Regarding the Mutt Lange style backing vocals, now when you're talking about taking the chord, are you talking, just to keep it simple, he sings it on the root note and then he'll harmonize, say, on the third, and then harmonize on the fifth, that kind of thing?
Yeah, totally. I mean, very, very rudimentary. I mean, again, this is not rewriting the book here, but it just seemed to work out, and it was a way that I learned of writing out, and then you could see the direct correlation between singing these right notes, like singing scales, which are singing these melodies, and it just made it all kind of clicked for me, as opposed to sitting there in the studio, granted back in the day with analog tape, to sit there and try to work out harmonies when you have to fast forward and rewind. I mean, nowadays with Pro Tools, you can do it very easily, because you can just go from one point to the next point and punch in. But back in the day, to sit there and have to work out notes and parts, it wasn't really a smart thing to do. So this just made absolute sense to me when Jack taught me how to do this. And again, it's still a process that I use today, and it seems to work out great.
What's something else that, say, Phil shared with you about Mutt Lange's production style?
One of the most important things is never be married to any idea, or part too much, and always be open to changing. I think with any producer, any writer, that's the key. But with Def Leppard, it was much different, because those guys were all like part people, part writers, to where back in like Pyromania, Pete Willis was still in the band, and Steve Clark, of course. Steve Clark wrote so many of those great riffs, and Rick Savage on bass, he wrote a lot of those guitar parts, Foolin' and whatnot. Now, they were part people. They weren't whole songwriters. With Trixter, with me, I was the guy who was writing full songs, and I would bring them in, and then we'd rip them apart. But that was one of the things that I still to this day, until we're mixing and mastering, I'm always changing stuff. You know what I mean? Until it's all done and I go, yeah, this sounds right. I'm always at the point where I'm always striving for, let's say, perfection with the music and the songs. So what I learned from those guys is to never be afraid, no matter what. Never be afraid to completely change gears. It's been well documented many times that with Def Leppard making Hysteria, for sure, that they would have a song going with Mutt, and all of a sudden he would just go, this is terrible, and they'd scrap it and just start again. You know, granted, that's also why Hysteria took 3 years to make, but it's kind of like the attitude is, it doesn't matter how long it takes you to get there, as long as you get there. And with the Def Leppard guys, and with working with Mutt, the whole attitude was, it's got to be great. That's kind of my attitude that I take in with making records. And I've always strived for greatness. Trixter was real kind of rough around the edges on the first record. We were kids. I was 18 years old making that record and didn't know anything about making records, but I learned really quick. But I always tried to do my best, as the band did. And what we lacked in, let's say, technical perfection, we made up for with heart and soul. And that's the reason why Trixter succeeded, because the kids believed in us. We were believable. And a funny story was, with the first Trixter record, getting back to it, was that I wanted the record to be mixed by Mike Shipley. I wanted it to sound like Def Leppard, to sound like Rat, to sound like that. But the powers that be at MCA Records and Mechanic Records, they had this mentality, and even one of our managers, they said, we want you guys to sound more like you're a garage band because it's going to be more believable. We don't want you guys to sound like you're Def Leppard because the kids won't believe it. It was hard for me. I kicked and screamed, but it seemed to work out because when we released Give It To Me Good, it resonated with the kids. And if you listen to it, it has very much a raw garage sound, and it seemed to work. I can't complain, but the success of it enabled me to go back to MCA Records and say, first I went to them with the first Trixter album, and I said, as soon as we had success, Give It To Me Good was #1 for 13 weeks on MTV. We were selling 20,000 records a week. You've heard the story. When the roller coaster starts going, you got to have your A game on. So I went back to MCA and I said, I want to get Mike Shipley to remix the whole record. I want the record to sound the way I want it to sound. And they weren't having it, and it would cost way too much money. But what I was able to get them to do was to be able to remix and re-record some of the vocals and some guitar parts for the 1 in a Million single, which is the video remix and whatnot. That's on the video version of 1 in a Million. And that was what I wanted us to sound like. So when we did that, when I got the mix, and I remember our producer, Bill Ray, flew over to England with Mike, and Mike was working on, I think he was working on, trying to think, maybe a Starship record. Him and Mutt had done a record with Starship, I think. They were at Real World Studios, Peter Gabriel's studio. So Bill Ray, our producer, flew over to England, and they did the remix for 1 in a Million at Peter Gabriel's studio. And I remember him calling me and playing me the mix like over the phone, and I'd be like going, no, bring the guitar up here, bring this background vocal part down. Nowadays, we're so accustomed to Zoom and Skype, and you just FaceTiming instantly, and you forget that, you know, and granted, Bill and Mike Shipley were in England, and I'm in New Jersey, and we're mixing our record that way. So it was just incredible. But that was one of the great things as far as me learning. You know, I knew that I wanted to aspire to be, let's say, Def Leppard. I wanted to have something at that level. And if you listen to the video remix of 1 in a Million, you could hear what I was going for. And that was more the sound that we got on the second Trixter record when I kind of took over the reins and started co-producing. You can hear that on the second record. That's another interview. The other cool thing that I learned from Def Leppard, from Phil and from Joe and Rick, making records is, and something that I sort of do to this day, is the drums are recorded last. all the drums on Pyromania and Hysteria were done at the end when all of the vocals, and it was Mutt's attitude that he wanted to have all the vocals in place so he knew where to put drum fills or where not to put drum fills. Back then, you still had analog tape, so editing drums was not like it is nowadays to where you can completely do anything you want, basically. And it's a technique that Phil uses with his solo projects outside of Def Leppard and that I use, and I think the other guys, Joe does the same thing with his bands, but it's definitely a Mutt Lange staple production technique that the drums are done last.
That's incredible. So he lays everything down to a click track?
Nowadays, I do fairly, let's say, in-depth drum programming. I'm not a drummer, but I can program the shit out of in Pro Tools and do some pretty convincing drum parts, if you will. I think it's just a matter of put a pattern down, get the basic idea. Look, we all go, when we're making records, and I'm sure Bo or anybody you talk to go, oh man, hey, do the You Shook Me All Night Long thing, or like I say all the time, it's either like a Def Leppard, a Van Halen reference. I go, hey man, do the Jamie's Crying beat, do the Photograph thing here. It's a common thing that everybody knows, you know what I mean? So it's very the way we kind of talk, and I think most bands do the same thing when they're making a record. It makes getting to what we all want that much easier when you go, okay, man, give me the, let's say, what was I doing recently? Give me a Hot for Teacher type drum groove, and then there's no confusion there. Everybody knows what we're looking for.
There was one thing that I read in Bobby Blotzer's book that I thought was just incredible. He said that by, I think it was Invasion, he was just laying down the drum tracks by himself.
Yeah.
So
well, I know that, in Blotzer's.
No band at all, and he got tired of people throwing him off or screwing up while he's laying down a track, that he just would memorize the song and then go in there and cut it without anybody. I thought that was incredible.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was, but that was, again, Adam, that was at the time where that was after Pyromania, and that's when everybody learned about, I think that was at the point when everybody really started focusing, drummers especially, started focusing on playing to a click track, and that's when also bands started doing the sequencing where, a lot of those records from the 80s, we used it on the Trixter records. I still use it to this day. It's the old tried and true Eddie Van Halen sequencing thing that he did on Why Can't This Be Love, and that he did on 1984 as well, like on I'll Wait. It's synth bass going on. And a lot of the 80s records, the one Bryan Adams record, I think called Into the Fire or whatnot, that was real drums, but the drummer, Mickey Curry, played to a sequence bass part because it was all about, in the 80s, they found out, and this is another Def Leppard thing that I think people know, but maybe they don't, that Mutt's production style was very much based on, in the 80s, after AC/DC. He was always blown away by how good the dance records, the new wave 80s records sounded, because they were using the drum machines, the Lynn drum, kick drum, to get that thud. And it was a perfect hit and a perfect frequency every time. And the big part of that was how great those records sounded in the nightclubs for dancing and to get that big bottom. So Mutt was the first guy back in the day who was doing, let's say, sequencing bass, because all of Pyromania, even on High and Dry, there's sequenced keyboard parts all over those records. And most of the records from the 80s, and I'm sure on all of the rap records, I'm sure if you ask Bo, he'll tell you there's a ton of synth bass, sub stuff to give it that warmth, because you couldn't at the time, and even nowadays, it's a hard thing to get a bass guitar to sound so round and so thick as some of those, let's say, dance records from the 80s. But if you listen to Pyromania and Hysteria, you can very much hear some of that 80s, and that was a big influence on Mutt for his production style.
Have you heard of where a drummer just went in? I mean, they'd still lay down the drums first, that's the part that blew me away.
I know the story about Bobby Blotzer doing that. I mean, that is incredible. Bobby was very diligent, and he obviously charted out the songs, and basically he was a live drum machine, a live drummer who had every fill worked out. Some of those drum parts on those Rat records, some of my favorite drum parts ever. I love Bobby's playing on those records. I mean, I had never done that with a drummer where playing the drums first, but hey, there you go. Rat does their drum tracks first. Def Leppard does their drum track last.
Is there anything else you want to plug about the new release?
Tokyo Motor Fist is a Frontiers Records concoction, if you will. They're known for putting various people together, and Tokyo Motor Fist came about because the fact that Ted and I grew up together on the scene. Trixter and Danger were kind of neck and neck back in the mid-'80s, and we got our deals around the same time. So the friendship's been there, and Chuck I'd known since I was a little kid when he was in Rainbow with Joe Lynn Turner. Joe Lynn Turner lived in the next town over from me when I was a little kid. I used to ride my bicycle over to his house and drop Trixter demo tapes off for him when he was in Rainbow, you know, when Stone Cold was huge, and wound up playing with Joe, you know, much later in life, and I love Joe. He's one of my favorite singers ever. But Tokyo Motor Fist is one of those things, and we're on our second record. The second record is Tokyo Motor Fist Lions. One of the really cool things is I've been playing the last couple of years. I've been playing with Dennis D. Young from Styx. I've been playing in his solo band, filling in for his guitar players, and he played a keyboard solo on the title track, Lions, which is a really cool story, and you're going to dig this for your show. I went over to Dennis's house in Chicago in December, and he played the solo on his original Oberheim 8 keyboard, which is the world-famous 80s keyboard that, you know, Eddie Van Halen played Jump on, that Dennis did all the stick stuff, Too Much Time on Your Hands, Fooling Yourself. He played this solo on his original Oberheim 8 from back in the late 70s, early 80s, and when we were doing it, he goes, here, check this out. And he still has the tape on it, like duct tape, with the presets marked for each song. It has the Fooling Yourself sound. It has the Too Much Time on My Hands, the Best of Times. And what's crazy about it is that it's mono. It's a mono keyboard, and it just, you hit a chord on that or hit one bass note. He started doing the intro to Too Much Time on My Hands. There it is. No EQ, no effects. That's the sound. And that's what he played this solo on, and just honored to have Dennis. Dennis has become a dear friend of mine, and to have an iconic rock legend like him on my record is, again, another dream come true.
Incredible. Are you also in Danger?
I play with Danger as well. So yeah, we have a very incestuous relationship, especially on this record, because you got Tokyo Motor Fist is the guitar player and singer of Danger, the bass player and creative genius of Danger, Bruno Ravel, mixed the new Tokyo Motor Fist record. So, again, Danger, Trixter fans rejoice, because the new Tokyo Motor Fist record is going to blow you away, and that's a guarantee.